Hi, this is Allie with the Perception Trainers, author of The Perception Diet, and today we're here for part 2 of why you should care about stress. If you didn't watch part 1, I would highly suggest you go and do that before listening to this part. I have added the link below, and in that video essentially what we talked about was the stress response. So what happens when your body goes into fight or flight, and the actual physiological, mental stuff that goes on when you are in a state of stress. So today I want to talk about some of the symptoms you might be experiencing if you are in fact someone who is dealing with being hyper stressed and being someone who's got a chronic stress. This in medical literature sometimes is called adrenal fatigue or adrenal burnout, chronic stress syndrome, and basically the reason that I want to talk about the symptoms today is because I want to express to you just how much stress can affect pretty much every area of our bodies, and a lot about our minds, and how sometimes we can get led on a wild goose chase of chasing down symptoms and trying to pinpoint what's wrong with us based on what's going on, when really it could all boil down to you're just overstressed, and whatever's happening in your body could pretty much all be linked to that. So as we talked about last time, when your body is in a state of stress, when your stress hormones get produced, many things happen. So like your peristalsis slows down, digestion slows down, saliva production slows down, blood rushes from the digestive organs into the arms and legs, and your pupils dilate, your mind becomes focused, and that is what happens in an acute stress situation, okay? So as I mentioned in the last video, we were meant to have situations of acute stress followed by a period of rest and recovery, where our nervous system then switches back over to rest and digest, and all of those physiological changes are meant to reverse themselves, okay? So so the digestion gets back started. When cortisol is released, which is a stress hormone, understand that the body then mobilizes stored body sugars, so the glycogen that's stored in your skeletal muscles and maybe even in your liver gets mobilized, so floods back into the bloodstream to give your cells energy so that you can fight or flee. And that is meant to reverse. And so all of these things are meant to happen. But what happens when you're in a state of chronic stress and your body is overproducing your stress hormones? So like we talked about in the last video, you wake up to an alarm, stress. You jump up out of bed and think about all the things you have to do that day, you're stressed. You climb into your car, you fight traffic on the way to work, that's stress. You open your emails and there's all these things that you need to do that day, stress, right? So we kind of live in a society here where we are constantly bombarded and constantly activating our stress hormones and our stress mechanisms if we're not mindful to be not activating them, or if we just live this kind of really lovely life where we don't have stress. And I want you to understand that the stress response is actually a calculated risk on behalf of your body. Okay, so know that our bodies were not ever designed to be living in a state of constant stress. Our bodies were not designed to be living in a state where our adrenal glands and our stress hormones are being activated over and over and over again. And we're never designed to live in a world where our adrenal glands and our stress hormones are being activated and then we don't have adequate time to rest and recover. So to understand that the stress response is good for a brief period of time, okay? So it made sense when we needed to run away from a tiger, right? Because think about producing the stress hormones and having everything that happens when we're stressed, physiologically and mentally and emotionally, that goes on when we're stressed, made sense when we were going to run away from a lion, because that was a life or death situation, right? But now, in our world where we don't actually face life or death situations anymore, but our stress response is still being activated the exact same way, it doesn't make sense anymore for our health. It doesn't make sense anymore for our survival, okay? So what you need to understand is when your boss yells at you and you still perceive that as a threat to your survival, just like we talked about in the last video, how your mind will jump straight from getting yelled at to, you know, being fired, getting laid off, don't have money, don't have food, I'm going to die. Your mind doesn't have to go through all of those things, because that would be ineffective if we were being chased by a lion. We couldn't think about the lion chasing us and, you know, figure all that out before we run away. We need to be able to see it and run away. Our brains still do the same thing. So our stress response being activated over and over and over again is not what our bodies were designed for. Okay, so this is why we see such physical, mental, and emotional problems when we are in a state of chronic stress. Okay, so first thing you might notice when you start getting into a state where you're chronically stressed out is your digestion starts to suffer, okay? And that makes perfect sense, right? Because like we talked about, when your stress response is activated, your peristalsis slows down, so movement of your food through your digestive system slows down, your saliva production slows down, enzyme production slows down, so automatically digestion suffers. And then if the blood is rushing away from your digestive organs, there's not enough blood to do all the work that needs to happen for digestion. And when you have digested nutrients, there's not enough blood to take those nutrients and carry them out to your cells. So your digestion is going to suffer. So if you're struggling with indigestion, if you're struggling with chronic constipation, diarrhea, if you're feeling like, you know, sometimes this food works for me and sometimes it doesn't, you feel like you have like a gabillion food sensitivities, much of that could be due to stress. Okay, second thing that happens is cravings. And this, again, makes perfect sense, because when cortisol is produced, you're going to be mobilizing your stored body sugars into your blood. And then because our stress response is no longer followed by a fight or a flee, which would burn off that sugar that was in your bloodstream. Usually now when we're in fight or flight, we're sitting in our cars, we're sitting at our desks, we're watching TV, we're watching the news, blah, 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 blah. So those body sugars are not being burnt off. So we're having this spike in blood sugar, which then our pancreas needs to produce more insulin, which then causes a dip in our blood sugar. And then when that happens, we crave sugary foods. We want to eat cake, we want to eat cookies, we want to eat chocolate, because those things are going to give us an instant energy boost, and it's going to spike our blood sugar again. And then that blood sugar spike is going to cause insulin, which is then going to cause a dip, and you can get on this roller coaster. And then also when you're chronically stressed out, you're usually chronically fatigued, so you're going to want things like caffeine, you're going to want things like sugar, because that's going to give you that hit of energy that you want. But that's not actually going to be serving your body so much, right? Okay. You might notice that you have chronic racing thoughts, and you might deal with the feeling of being tired and wired. So like you lay down in bed at night and you can't fall asleep because you can't shut off your mind and can't shut off your body. That's your stress response, right? It's keeping you active, it's keeping you alert, it's keeping you awake. And since there's nothing in your actual environment that's making sense for the threat, your mind will just make something up, right? So you're going to be thinking about all these things that you're worried about and creating these circumstances in your head, because it's going to make that constant, that alertness, that awareness, that, you know, effect of the stress response make sense. Does that make sense? You may notice back pain. You may notice headaches. You may notice that your blood pressure is all over the place. Again, all of these things make perfect sense when we talk about the stress mechanism that goes on in your body. You may notice that you crave salty foods, because when your adrenal glands are overtaxed, your body is actually using salt. Your adrenal glands use salt as part of their function, so you may crave salty foods because you're being depleted. You may notice that your immune system totally tanks, because again, right, when you're in this fight or flight, your body is not in rest and digest or cleanup mode, right? So even your white blood cells are going to be functioning differently, because again, is it more important to fight an infection or to run away from a lion? It's definitely more important to run away from the lion. And again, remember, when your stress response is activated, your body assumes this is a life or death situation. We have to activate this response in order to help you run away or fight whatever's happening. And because if that's being activated over and over and over again, your body is constantly going to be prioritizing this stress, and they're fighting the infection and digesting your food properly, and all of these things are going to take a back seat because it's a calculated risk on behalf of your body. You may notice tons of inflammation, joint pain, swelling, because again, these hormones and these, they're actually inflammatory hormones. And so if they're being overproduced, you're going to run into lots of inflammation in your body. Weight gain. Obviously, this is a huge one. Most people notice this, or maybe a lot of people don't even notice that they're in a state of stress until they start gaining weight, especially around the middle, because again, that cortisol is messing with your blood sugar levels and causing you to crave foods that are not good for your body, and they're causing your blood sugar, again, your blood sugar levels to be all over the place, which messes up insulin, messes up your digestion, and all of this can lead to weight gain, especially around the middle. You may even think that you have other endocrine issues. You might think that your thyroid is low. You might think that your sex hormones aren't working properly. And a lot of the times they aren't. But the cause of that is going to be the adrenal burnout, because remember that all of our systems work together, and especially the endocrine system. So if one part of your endocrine system is overtaxed, it's going to cascade effect all the way down the line. So I know I've worked with lots of people who thought that they had a thyroid condition, and they did. Their thyroid was definitely taxed, but it was because their adrenal glands were so taxed that it was causing that extra pull and extra strain on their thyroid, which then led to a thyroid issue. So as you can see, you can easily be sent down a wild goose chase of symptoms and thinking you may have IBS and you have a thyroid issue and your sex hormones are messed up and you've got pre-diabetes and blah, 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 blah. And all of this could be coming from stress. And I'm not saying that absolutely everything that everyone is dealing with is because of stress. But I am saying that for sure, if you are in a state of constant stress, you're going to notice symptoms, and a lot of the time those symptoms are going to exacerbate anything else that might have been going on in your body, or it could be causing what's going on in your body. So just to think about it, just to see if any of these things resonate with you, and if maybe you can think about if you are in a state of constant stress, or if you are noticing a lot of these symptoms but you don't think that you're stressed. The last thing I want to say about it is, again, I need you to understand stress is relative, okay? So just because you look at someone else and think like they work 2 jobs and they go to school and they have kids and whatever, they're stressed. I have a life that's much easier than theirs, so I am probably not stressed. I want you to understand that you can be sitting in a spa. You can be getting your feet rubbed and your face massaged and have beautiful harp music playing and drinking cucumber water and be in a state of stress. If you're sitting there thinking about all the things you have to do after your spa appointment, or you're thinking about your taxes or whatever, if you're thinking about the news, you can be in a state of stress no matter what your environment is. You can be in a state of stress no matter what your life is. And just to understand that stress is relative. If you're stressed, you're stressed. It doesn't matter what your life looks like, and there's no reason to feel like you can't say that you're stressed because your life is easier than someone else's, okay? So just, if you are feeling stress, if you are dealing with stress, you're dealing with stress. It doesn't really matter what your life looks like. It's a lot to do with your perception. Okay, so those are the signs and symptoms of chronic stress, and I just wanted to outline those just in case you're dealing with some things in your body or in your mind or in your emotions. Like if you're feeling really emotionally overtaxed and overdrawn and everything is overwhelming, and you're constantly, even if you're struggling with things like it, not to say again that this is the absolute cause for everybody, but it can even cause things like addiction, because if you're so overstressed and so overtaxed and you have nowhere to drive that stress, it's easy to take a substance to make yourself feel better. And that would be totally reasonable. And so again, I just want you to think about this. Just think about if maybe any of this resonates with you. And in the next video, we'll talk about some things you can do to help yourself feel better if you're dealing with chronic stress. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.